allows the National Assembly cannot do by virtue of the provisions of the Constitution is that it cannot impeach the governor.
Okay, so Barrister Egbule, once again, the reason why I asked us to start with a definition is so that the rest of the conversation would trace its way back to that definition. You said it's a shift from the norm, right? But you're taking us back to the norm. You're taking us back to the Constitution, which is the ground norm, right? Yes, the National Assembly can take over the function of a House of Assembly that is not functional, but isn't the sole administrator an extension, an appendage of the president? Isn't he here on behalf of the president? So when you talk about expenditure, shouldn't it be coming from the federal purse?
Well, for the purposes of explanation, for the purposes of clarity, you did ask a question with respect to the budget, and I said that it is the National Assembly that now make laws as though it is the House of Assembly of Rivers State. It is a shift. It is a shift, but not a shift in terms of nomenclature. But when it comes to governance, like I said, governance is a continuum. And so because we have a state of emergency, does not now mean that the sole administrator can dip his hand into the consolidated revenue fund of Rivers State to begin to make spendings. Such spendings must be approved. And also not forget that before his appointment, there was no budget. So there was need for government to make expenditures, and such expenditures must be made pursuant to the appropriation law of Rivers State, which, as it stands now, the National Assembly has the enabling powers to now make. Yes, the sole administrator is an appendage of the president, no doubt, but here in Rivers State, government must continue.
So can he take any decision without the authorization of the president? Does he have any form of liberty or freedom to govern without, just like ministers go back to the president every federal executive meeting? Does he have that authority to say, okay, you know what, I'm appointing you to be this, you go build this road, you go build this school, or install CCTVs, like, the controversy that has struck us in Rivers State? Does he have the right to do that without the input of the president?
Well, I'll answer this question by asking another question. Are we assuming that he has been doing that without the authorization of the president? I mean, the president declared the state of emergency and appointed him as a sole administrator. Naturally, the assumption would be that there is that channel of communication between the sole administrator and the president. So the question should be, is anybody alluding or is anybody assuming that the sole administrator carry out actions without the authorization of the president? I don't think so.
So the reason why I'm asking is based on the budgeting yet again. So if he's directly under the influence of the president yet again in a special situation, shouldn't there be a special fund? 6 months is the duration, with a possible extension by another 6 months. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do not know if the law allows for a full extension after, the 1 year given by law. If that is the case, can he do a budget? And if he does a budget, is the budget applicable to the democratic government if the democratic government returns? These are some of the questions a lot of people are thinking and asking. So what would be your answer as a lawyer?
Well, you're looking at a budget as though a budget is just a document made by the executive. A budget becomes a budget to the extent that it has been passed by the House of Assembly. And I just said now, because of the situation that we have, the National Assembly has taken over the powers and exercised the functions of the Rivers State House of Assembly. So the budget you're going to have, pursuant to that proclamation, is the budget made by the National Assembly. It is a law, because as it stands today, it is the National Assembly that makes law for Rivers State. So the question we should ask, did the budget go through the rudiments of passage of a bill? If it went through it, that budget is binding even on a democratic government.
Okay, so I do have a commercial coming up in about 1 minute, 30 seconds time. But we're going to throw this question quickly at you. Now, during the ratification by the Senate, they said if there is an agreement between the factions in Rivers State, then the president should look at returning democracy or rescinding the state of emergency declaration. We are being told, reports say, that both factions have reconciled. I even saw on your Facebook post where you alluded an article to the reconciliation. Shouldn't we be talking about restoration of democratic process? And if that is the case, why do we need the budget to be before the National Assembly if there will be a possible return to democratic system in River State?
Well, the meetings leading to the reconciliation of the political crisis that we had in River State, I'm sure it took place last week.
Okay.
But this budget we're talking about now has been on for more than 1 month. So I'm sure that the National Assembly and even the sole administrator didn't contemplate that the parties will resolve. But be that as it may, government must continue. Like I said before, government is a continuum. So government will not be halted on the basis of allowing the parties to reconcile themselves. Whenever they reconcile, I'm sure that even the National Assembly has powers too, by revoking the proclamation by a simple majority.
I was going to ask that question, but when we come back from the break, we'll talk about that more and how we can hold the sole administrators' governance accountable. Stay tuned.
Nigeria Info. Right back after this.
Once again, we're looking at it from legal issues or legal perspectives. And it is because recently the money budgeted for CCTVs in the breakouts has caused a lot of controversial debates on several platforms, and that's why we're looking at it. And I'm looking at it with Godspower Egbule on the show. Godspower, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
So before the break, you mentioned the fact that the National Assembly is powered by the Constitution, to help with the budget if the House of Assembly is not functional. And you also said that the sole administrator is answerable entirely, totally, wholesomely to the president. Now, how do we hold, or who do we hold accountable? That's the first. Because once again, Rivers people pay taxes, which has generated revenue that the government want to spend. How are Rivers people going to find answers? Who are they going to hold? National Assembly members, the president, the sole administrator, who will explain this money that has been earmarked for installation of CCTVs and the other things that have caused controversy in the state?
Okay, quickly. Criminal matters are personal. By virtue of Section 7 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, you cannot hold somebody responsible for a crime committed by another person. So, if there is any issue of accountability and stewardship, the sole administrator will be solely held responsible, and you cannot pack that balls, cannot pass that ball, to the table of another person. The sole responsible for account of stewardship with respect to the resources of Rivers State.
Okay, so I also asked the question: if this budget is passed and democratic conditions are returned to the state, will the budget be binding on the democratic actors? I'm talking the House of Assembly and the executive arm of government as well. Will it be binding on them?
Of course. I had said by virtue of Section 11 of the Constitution, the National Assembly has the powers, a law made by the House of Assembly, and in this instance, the National Assembly, even on the democratic government.
Is, like you've said, there is no vacuum in government. This is some sort of substitute government. Why not the focus? I'm looking at it from a legal perspective now. Why not the focus be on restoring democratic government, and then democratic processes are allowed, for things like budget, appointment of RESEC boss, or, the other things that are currently ongoing?
Okay, well, you know that I've always said that when you take a look at situations like this, you must look at them holistically. And so it's not good to look at them when you single out acts without taking a look at the whole nature of what has happened. What has happened is there will be need to pay workers' salaries.
But they have been paying workers' salaries. But they have been spending. They have been paying workers' salaries. Government has been running for more than 3 months, and yet there was no budget because, like you said, a special situation created. So I'm struggling to understand why there is a need for a permanent situation in a temporary environment.
No, there is no permanent situation for a temporary scenario. What happened? To have a of emergency. I just said, how do you expect workers' salaries to be paid? How do you expect contractors to be paid? Because you cannot take 1 naira in the consolidated revenue fund of Rivers State without a budget. So there'll be need for us to have a budget.
All right. Can the National Assembly declare the end to the state of emergency?
By virtue of Section 305, sub 6D, the National Assembly, which is the Senate and the House of Reps, can revoke the state of emergency by a simple majority. So they have the power.
Interesting. And then, I'm sorry I'm taking this back, but I want to ask, you said that in a criminal matter, one person cannot substitute another, in terms of facing charges. If you say there is a problem, let's say with the budget, I beg your pardon, and the sole administrator is to be held accountable, how would or how can Rivers people hold him accountable? Because once again, it is a special setting in government. It's not the normal. Is he liable in terms of going to court, taking him to court? Is he liable? Is he something like me? I don't know. Let's find for you listening to Join and the Power Administrator has been offering for 3 months. The very time it was present. When I look back and I was for the administrator, I can't help but have some of the things that are being done, including the French administrator. Who I say as exactly a lot of the things which came. Of people talking, tongues wagging, and yeah, it got me thinking about the legal roles and responsibilities of a sole administrator. When an administrator is by the president, who can cause to say legal issues on the rules. 932 817 923 0003 0817 923 0003. Remember, I've got my me on the show. I'll take my best call right now. 92.9 Jerry email. All right, let's get your thoughts then.
I want to ask the lawyer onto you, your studio, that what is the provision of the Constitution regarding election under this circumstance? Because you may recall that the what do you call it, INEC, right? INEC has made a declaration that they are going to conduct by election in the country, but they will not conduct by election in Rivers State, Ghana, constituency 2, because there is a state of emergency currently in Rivers State. So for INEC to have this disposition, I want to ask the lawyer in your studio, is it right for Rivers State to go on election them circumstances that INEC is saying that they can conduct elections?
But an anonymous caller, it's not rocket science. If the legislative arm of government has been suspended, what election you'd conduct to?
No, excuse me.
I'm listening.
I am saying that INEC is the fire of election.
And I understand you correctly. So, anonymous caller, I do not have time. Understand the question I'm asking you. I'm saying if the assembly has been suspended, what election are you asking them to conduct in Ghana local government?
I accept that.
Understand.
INEC can conduct elections, conduct elections under this imposition that we have currently. And you talk about legality. I mean, ascribe legality when we have an illegal arrangement in place. Because your guest, of course, at the time you were confused, but you know the conjecture of and at the time, this man has been spending on without protection. Are we trying to legality in Rivers because to master the egg from people, few individuals? That's before say it again. That what are currently in place in Rivers State is an error. We are progressing in error. And because there is difficult blame and being stopped us, what is happening as a legality.
Right.
Like I said, he should get to tell us where the administrator will spend the money, where are they getting it from?
All right.
This is a state in Nigeria. It also belongs to the president. It belongs to the people.
Mufasa, thank you. My guests will try and answer you. Talk with me.
Good morning. Good morning to you. Yes. I think your guests are trying to explain that by the rule, the sole administrator of Rivers spend money to expect that and he will sit down and do things. And so many have to spend on his salaries. There are some uncompleted projects that he would so like to do. There are places that I think he feels better that he can look and kill men abuse. That is ready for now. Until when the abuse are into law, then the citizen can come in. Then looking at either situation, the research situation, the provision at that and it's a time before the expiration of time given to him. So him to actually localize him because the National Assembly is there, looking and directing where necessary. So it's still for to local government election. Thank you.
Very much, Let Barry. 1939 Jericho. Justice from our walk.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
It's me who just calling from Hoda.
Simply.
Speaker, before this first one, it's like we are progressing in legal. Progressing really illegal organization. Because Somebody have the right to get River State for the tune of $2 million. How did he come to that position? He comes to people at this question. We can have one jumping here.
Hello, are you there, sis?
That's to tell you that definitely something is. Let's first not tell about the right. Will you operate to taxi?
All right, Justice, thank you. Godspower from Remote. Godspower, what is on your mind? I'd like to hear.
Good morning again, my friend.
Yeah, good morning, Godspower.
My name is Egbule. I want to press this your guest, man that has been so clear and very right in analyzing and discussing the politics and constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. After today, I think the stone administrator has done what he was appointed to so far. And like your guest said, that where a state assembly cannot make laws or oppress, the National Assembly can so do, ensuring that that state moves forward. And that's what they are doing. The sole administrator in River State. Now, before now, the Supreme Court said that there was no governance in River State. Recall that there was no appropriation in River State, and they were spending money. Where all the money they were spending coming from? So people that are talking, criticizing the sole administrator on spending in and all that, I don't know where that's from.
All right, Godspower, thank you. All right, thank you. What you're supposed to do. Now, Barrister Godspower, you just brought a question to mind, and I want to ask, what are the specific roles? This is why a state of emergency was declared in Rivers State. If you remember, if you catch back, was because the president said there was no. What are those? It's a special situation, he called it, a shift from the norm, and one would expect that a special fund would have been put in place for the running of the state till a return to a democratic system. Like, for instance, if it was as a result of insecurity where there was a threat to the sovereignty of a state, then we would not be talking about some of the things that are happening in River State. So what are the specific roles and functions of the sole administrator from a point of law?
Okay. In my earlier speech, when I started, I said that a state of emergency by prudential doctrine and to suspension of democratic institutions and sometimes curtailment of fundamental rights. I said that earlier.
Yeah, you did.
Now, if a state of emergency is put in this and a democratic system is suspended, it means that a new government is now brought in to run for the state. Okay. That new government is straight as the executive arm. And if the House of Assembly is also suspended, the Assembly now comes in to talk about the functions of the House of Assembly. So the function of the sole administrator must look in line with the functions of the National Assembly, which means a government put in place to run the affairs of the state.
So like a governor, basically.
Well, like a governor. That is fundamental for the understanding of everybody. Because if you say for a governor now, there are certain rights that accrue to the governor, may not accrue to the sole administrator. Now, that is what happens. A government in place to run the affairs. Now, you said something about contingency fund. Where are you going to get contingency fund from? Because the budget of the Federation is passed by the National Assembly, and there is no contemplation that you are going to have a state of emergency now for the National Assembly to have appropriated from Federation account to River State. In any case, most states will oppose it. Most will say, you cannot spend. Federation account is dealing with the affairs of the national. You cannot use money standing in the consolidated revenue fund of the Federation to run the affairs of the state.
But I asked you a question earlier when you said this. Okay. The state has been spending for the past 3 months. So where did those monies, come from?
Well, you see, if I give an analysis of this, I think it will take us back to the situation that we had prior to the declaration of a state of emergency and the political imbroglio, that characterized the affairs of River State. So for me, I would like sleeping dogs to lie. I will not wish to make comments now that tend to appear like the parties have not resolved their political differences. The parties have resolved, and so commentary now must be channeled towards a permanent reconciliation of the issues. Commentaries must be reconciliatory. Commentary must not sound as though you're fanning the embers of discord and discontent. But you see, that's the challenge.
But as citizens, we are mandated. It is our civic responsibility to ensure that government is indeed for the people, by the people, and of the people. And if such billions are questionable, now I'm not an expert in the installation of CCTVs, and I do not know if maybe the cost is right or not. I can't tell. But if these figures are questionable, then we have a right as a people, to put out these questions. But now, because it's not a normal situation, we don't even know who we're going to ask these questions. And some people are clapping for the House of Representatives. But if the House of Representatives finds anything questionable, how do we go about it? And as Rivers people, we need to have that conversation as well.
Well, you see, when it comes to passage of budgets, all the political actors must be held responsible, the executive and the legislature. Because what the executive does is to provide estimates. It is actually the National Assembly, the Senate, and the House of Reps that actually pass it. So if they pass the budget, what they have also done is that they have given approval, they have given imprimatur to what the executive brought before them. Now they have detected it. The question we should now be asking, what should happen? Can they also, in the light of what they have said, pass that budget, or they can remove that item of the budget and pass the budget? What I think we should now do is, the National Assembly has seen some discrepancies with respect to capital expenditure in the budget. What they can now do is question those estimates and ask if those estimates should actually be formed part of the Rivers State budget, or you remove them. And I think that it's not a big issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Godspower. I've got to go. I've got a commercial coming up next. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kaleda.
All right, we'll go. That's where we'll stop it for today, I was going to say. But thank you very much for all of you who have contributed and who tried to call in. Do have yourself a fantastic day. Remember, Hello Port Harcourt is up next. And after that, Sunny Side, I am Kalada Kurubatipo. Always a pleasure having you on the other side of the radio.